And the Europeans are not much better, honestly.
No.
The Dutch, I don't understand this whole Nexperia thing. That is totally the trouble that right now the Dutch government is in. They
Mm.
brought it themselves.
Yes.
I don't know why they can't stay out of this, right? So the Dutch economy minister, Vincent Carmen, he's the one who want to have a meeting with Chinese commerce minister or economy minister. And he said that they're going to have further steps need to be taken to reach some kind of solution. He sounds optimistic, but the reality is that China hasn't answered him much. I
Mm.
think in the beginning, he first asked for a meeting. China even didn't answer immediately, but then they repeatedly asked for a meeting. The
Yeah.
problem right now Nexperia has is the production is in China,
Mm.
even though those are not high-end chips, but those are chips needs a lot. I didn't even know like a regular cars now needs
Yeah.
thousands of chips per car.
Yeah.
So it needs a company that can produce. Nexperia produces apparently 6 billion chips per month to help all the auto
Yeah.
industries, all auto companies in Europe and in the United States. And now China said no, no chips can go out, can leave China. So that created big trouble now for the auto industry in Europe and in the United States.
Yeah.
I guess the Dutch just never expected that China would react like this. I
Yes, I mean,
guess.
again, why would it not expect that? And why would it do this at all? Why would it disrupt something that was working perfectly
Yeah,
well?
yeah.
It's none of this makes any kind of sense. By the way, there was an article in the Financial Times about a week ago, which it was actually before the Expedia was seized in the way that it was, or at least its time management was removed and other people put in its place. But it made exactly that point that the if we're talking about the really super advanced chips, the ones that you need, the ultra sophisticated lithography machines for. I mean, they are about 0.1% of the international chip market or something like that.
Mhm.
I mean they're needed for some very very important, very high end applications, but the vast majority of chips that are used are middle to low end ones, and I
Yeah.
mean that is the core of the chip industry, and China dominates. I mean, it's probably before long going to be producing more than 50% of global supply of these chips. And I think the article said that by the mid 2030s, it could be as much as 60%. It's China is the overwhelmingly big producer of these chips. So, uh, again, people in The Hague in the Netherlands didn't think about this. I mean, they didn't look about this. So why do it? Why do this at all? There's a good company doing important work, useful for the European car industries, helping to keep jobs in Europe. They just walk in, they change the management of a company, they come up with entirely fictitious legal explanations of why they're doing it, and then they're surprised, and then they come along to China and they say, we want to negotiate, we want to talk. What is there now to talk about?
Well,
I mean, you've stolen my possession and I'm supposed to negotiate with you. It's
they froze the shares, the Chinese
yeah,
shares,
yeah,
which pretty much like they froze the Russian asset. That's
yeah,
what they did. Okay,
yeah.
there's no around it.
Yeah, but I mean, speaking as a former lawyer, I mean, treating someone else's property as your own
Yeah.
is, with under English law, is actually stealing.
Yes, it is.
Theft is the use of treating someone's property as your own.
I really think the whole thing is racist. I actually
Well, of
think
course it is. Absolutely, it is. It is completely racist. We are the superior Western white people.
yeah.
These people are these, um, savages in the Far East. We can do whatever we want to them. And if they come back, my God, that completely overturns and upsets the law of nature. I mean, that is a racist outlook. It's a colonial outlook.
Yeah. And they're trying to do, like Nexperia was a Dutch company, but it was on the verge of bankruptcy. It is Wintec who bought it. And the way the Wintec turned it around is because the Chinese market. And then they built the Chinese productions for the Chinese market to get it to the scale it's needed.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
once you have the scale, then you can provide also to European and American car companies. That's how they turned things around. And
absolutely.
I really think the Dutch government, even though I think they are under the pressure from the US, but I think the Dutch also want to grab it back. They do want to take advantage of the fact that US and China is
Yeah,
in this fight, and so they want to grab it the way the TikTok are being grabbed. But I think they see what's happening with TikTok, that China is probably will not allow them to just force a sale or something. So what they did is, I think their plan was just we seize it, and then now we have it. You have to sell it at a cheap price or something. They just never expected it. They don't even get to that stage to talk because
yeah.
China didn't even want to talk. I think
No, of
that's
course not. Of course not, because why would China talk if the
no.
production is in China? I mean, that's where the company's actual business is.
Mm,
If you want to reproduce its business in Europe by setting up your own factories, then that's your business. That's what you can do. You can spend the money on that. But what prevented you from doing that anyway? I mean, why did you have to steal somebody else's company in order to do this? But you're absolutely right. That is exactly what they wanted. They wanted it for themselves.
mhm,
They wanted to establish the Netherlands as a high-end, high-tech
mhm,
place. After all, they make the lithography machines, as we all
mhm,
know. They wanted all of this. And of course, the Americans were coming and whispering into their ear. And the usual people who run things nowadays in the civil service and in the governments in Europe, as in the United States, don't understand manufacturing. Probably they didn't realize. They probably knew about the fact that this company makes all these chips, but they didn't realize fully that it makes them in China. And I'm going to say something else. I have no doubt at all that the design of these chips is mostly Chinese
yeah,
also.
yeah. And then also remarkable is that it is actually within the company itself. There are three executives. Again, racist. I don't see any reason other than they would do this because
No.
it is the company managers, the chief legal officer, the chief financial officer, and the chief
Yes.
operating officer. The three of them, they are the one who send a petition and
Yes.
asking that company to do that. Why
Correct.
would a company executive do something like that? Basically, betray your own company.
Yes.
And then in the process, when they do that, the Dutch government, of course, have no brain to think through this thing, and they just
No.
immediately grabbed it.
Yes.
But the irony part is that this law, it's called the Goods Availability Act, that they using as the foundation, as the base for their action. The whole idea of this Goods Availability Act is to protect, among other things, supply chain. But by their action, they did exactly the opposite.
Well,
Right
exactly.
now, the supply chain is being disrupted because of what the Dutch government did. Isn't that
Well,
interesting?
that is exactly true. That is it's very interesting. It's exactly true, but it is the story of our times.
The
It is exactly
self-destruction,
the story. It's
isn't it?
self-destruction. Yeah. Well, I mean, as we've discussed, I think in previous programs, Europe is going through a massive process of de-industrialization, and the reason it is doing that, why is it doing that? Because it has blown up its own supply chains. I mean, literally, in the case of Nord Stream and the gas and all of that, but also in so many other ways as well. You know, this is what is so frustrating because it absolutely didn't need to be this way. I mean, it absolutely didn't. China understands perfectly well that it works to its own interests to develop good industrial partnerships. It's always said so. There's never been a problem here. We could have worked with China. We could have developed a plan together with China on how to do these things. and it was there for the taking.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. And
For
now
some,
it's not
yeah,
now it's getting hard for the Dutch government. What should they do? On the one hand, the auto companies from Europe and the US is putting pressure, like we need those chips, right?
yeah,
Again, it's billions of chips. You can't easily just get
no,
somewhere to start making it.
no,
And then the Chinese government is not actively engaging with the Dutch government.
yeah,
And also possibly the first that will once they started the real rare earth control, they could start with ASML. Could be the
yeah.
first one to get punished. So what should they do? I mean, they create this big mess now that they don't know what to do.
Well, you're quite so. I mean, what they need to do. I mean, we have this expression in Britain: when you're in a hole, stop digging. I mean, they should pick up the phone. They should say to not to Xi Jinping maybe, but to somebody in China, look, this has gone as far as it can. We understand that this isn't working for us. Can we meet? Can we talk? Can we see a way through? But of course, the problem now is the trust has gone.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, this is the thing. If you steal a company, to repeat again, this is theft. I mean, this qualifies, as far as I'm concerned, with straightforward theft. Seizing the company's properties, sacking its managers,
yeah,
treating it as a company that you control is an attempt, at least, to steal the company. When people behave in that way, the people on the other side can't trust them. I mean, it ought to be obvious and clear. And it's not as if this is an isolated affair. We had TikTok before, we've had Huawei before, we've had all of these things happen one after the other, and it accumulates and it builds up.
yeah. And that's why the sentiment actually in the Chinese netizens are
Mm.
really very angry with the Dutch government. Like, what
Well,
are they
absolutely.
crazy? How can you do something like that?
Yes,
So
yes.
so the Chinese government is not going to cave in anything. So what they're
You,
doing now is to make the Chinese part of the company basically independent from the Dutch part. So they're going to possibly take some of the customers, once they have the complete everything, there's still some legal, I guess, that they want to get it done. Once they do
which
that,
they,
they can grab all the customers, and those customers need those chips. Let's be very clear about
yeah,
that, right?
yeah,
They could
absolutely.
just and make the Dutch part totally irrelevant.
Yeah,
So whatever
which
they grabbed, they thought they seized, will worth pretty much nothing.
which which they will do. By the way, I mean, this goes on all the time. Because I take a great interest in aviation matters, because one of my best friends who passed away many years ago was an aviation lawyer. So I was reading about the new Chinese airline aircraft and its engines and the attempts the Americans have made basically to prevent development of these engines. It's just
Yeah, they will continue to try, and then yeah, it's
okay.
going to continue to be like that. And they just I don't know. I mean, smaller countries should stay out of it. When big countries are in
Yeah,
any
I know.
dispute, fight, I'm just thinking, okay, this is a common sense to me. Okay, two big guys are fighting. I'm the tiny person. I want to be away from them as much as possible. Why
Yeah.
do I jump on, to
Well, you've put a very, very good question, because I mean, once upon a time, that is exactly what would have happened. I mean, the Dutch government that I remember, because I used to go a lot to the Netherlands when I was young. And in those days, if somebody had come along and told the Dutch, well, look, you're going to stop your
uh-huh,
economic links with China or whatever, they would have said, go away. I mean, this has nothing to do with you. This is our business.
yeah,
These are our jobs. These are our companies. We don't have any quarrel with China. If you've got a quarrel with China, you sort it out with China. It's nothing to do with us. We have a very good, happy, a successful relationship with a country that trades and does business. Um, what has happened to Europe that we no longer do this anymore? I really cannot understand. It's this extraordinary change that has happened in Europe over the last 20, 30 years, where we subordinate everything to what the Americans want. And it doesn't even work to the Americans' advantage at the end of the day, because, as you rightly said, their car companies need these chips.
The finance minister Vincent Carmen, he actually one of his talking point, he said that China, he needs to make it explain to China that this is not under the pressure from US. Well, if that's the case, if the US doesn't pressure you, then you're taking on this action all by yourself. Why is that better? I mean, you seize the Chinese asset, whether with the pressure from US or not. This is not a good thing. He doesn't seem to understand that. He's like, yeah, this has nothing to do with US. You have problem with US. So I guess that's what you're trying to say, leave us out.
Yeah.
But you're the one who jump into this. Nobody
Yes.
asked you to jump into
No.
this.
No.
I,
No. Well, I mean, I can't explain it. I cannot justify it. To me, it is so undignified and so obviously wrong, especially a small country like the Netherlands, which depends on trade and which is heavily reliant on exports as well. You would have thought that they would want to maintain as good as possible relations with their key trading partners. And given that, the Netherlands exports machine tools and high-end equipment and all of those things, you would have thought that they especially would want to try and keep things with China on an even keel. I mean, I just don't understand why they can't see it. But there is a madness, and this is where I think people in China don't quite understand this, because as I've said many times, the trouble with Chinese is they're very rational and pragmatic people. There is a madness sweeping Europe, which is very, very difficult to explain. The Russians have been on the receiving end for the last 20 years, and now it's unfortunately spread to our dealings with China too. And in fact, it is easy to explain, because what has happened is that we, the great European civilized people, are suddenly realizing that the other people in Asia can make better cars, better chips, better everything than we do, or at least as good as we do. And that somehow, as I said, violates our own idea of what the natural order should be. So, when we come along to China and we try to lecture the Chinese, as we always do, as we always like to do, the Chinese just laugh because, I mean, why would they not? Given the realities, the actual changes that are taking place in the world. And this is something that we find impossible to accept, and it's driving us mad.
Yeah. And we talked this many times, that not doing something and not saying something is a good option many times, right?
Yeah.
Why do you feel you always have to do something? Like, okay. They need to learn that.
That is so Chinese. That is so Chinese. Isn't there even a Taoist saying about this? No
Yes.
action or something like that.
Yes.
It is, but it's profoundly true.
Yeah.
I can tell you again, as
Yeah.
a former lawyer,
Yeah.
what you don't say never gets you into trouble. What you say and do often does.
Yes. And then in the Chinese history book, when they commenting on some Huangdi, and if they say this Huangdi hasn't done much, it's not being regarded as negative.
No.
It means that he kept, the country moving without incidents. Okay, that's what it means. It means peaceful, stable. Okay, so but it seems like they always have to jump everywhere and believing whenever there is a problem, whenever there is the slightest problem, they have to like do something and say something and to make it worse. I think they always
absolutely. It always does. Absolutely, yes.